A young woman with raven black hair dressed in a blood-red bikini. If you're a fan of comic books, you would recognize the character I'm describing as Vampirella, the hot, confident femme fatale vampire. Though the character does not have the same mainstream popularity as DC or Marvel Comics characters, Vampirella has undoubtedly made a name for herself in the domain of independent comics. Not many people know this, but Vampirella has been published as a comic for over 50 years and has never successfully broken into the mainstream. Hopefully with this video I am able to convince at least one or two of you in the audience to check out this book and this character. How was Vampirella first introduced in comics? Vampirella, the magazine, was one of a wide line of horror comics that were anthologies featuring short, often unconnected stories, mostly in the suspense or horror genres. Warren Publishing, the parent company that published Vampirella, had other magazines in the same line, such as Creepy and Eerie. Like Vampirella, these comics had their own mascots, Uncle Creepy for Creepy and Cousin Eerie for Eerie, who hosted the comics and often introduced the stories before they began. Vampirella 2 followed this trend, with the key difference that each issue has a story dedicated to telling the story of Vampirella herself on her own adventures. Thus, Vampirella pulled double duty as both host of the comic telling these stories while also being the protagonist of one of these stories. However, the focus on traditional short horror comics slowly shifted to a larger emphasis on Vampirella and her ongoing storyline. Vampirella was first introduced in the pages of Vampirella issue number 1, published in 1969, written by Forrest J. Ackerman and drawn by Tom Sutton. They are also credited with creating the character themselves as a kind of supernatural host for the comics, like the Crypt Keeper from Tales from the Crypt. In the first story in the issue, we are introduced to Vampirella, who lives on the planet Drakulon, where instead of water, blood is the main source of hydration and nourishment. Rivers of blood are found all across Drakulon, with Vampirella and her people known as the Vampiri, using them as sources of nourishment. As such, Vampirella and her kin of human-looking aliens evolved to exhibit various vampire-like qualities, including wings that allow them to fly, the ability to turn invisible, and the ability to change into numerous animal forms, such as bats. Drakulon orbits around twin suns, Satyr and Circe, with the occasional appearance of Satyr in the Drakulon sky resulting in its rays scorching the surface of Drakulon and destroying nearly all life caught outside. Vampirella and her race lived in constant fear of the sun Satyr wiping them out, and this fear motivated her actions to leave the planet. By the latter issues of the run, it is highly implied that the effects of Satyr might have eradicated every other Vampiri on Drakulon, making Vampirella the last of her kind. When a spaceship, Arthur C. Clarke, named after the famed science fiction author, crashes onto Drakulon, Vampirella's curiosity is piqued and she travels there in the guise of a bat to investigate. The human astronauts, wary and on high alert in this strange world they've crash-landed on, immediately fired upon Vampirella, resulting in Vampirella attempting to turn invisible and escape. However, her weakened state due to not having consumed any blood recently made her drop her invisibility and take on her original form, frightening the astronauts even more. Thus, she resorted to attacking them using Karate, a fictional form of vampire martial arts, and incapacitating them. When biting on the neck of one of the astronauts, she discovers that humans have blood running through their bodies that is identical to the water of Vampirella's planet. The starved Vampirella drains them of their blood and investigates inside to find plenty more humans in cryostasis, whom Vampirella kills and drains of their blood. As the story ends, the text beneath Vampirella ominously reads, "Beware Earth, Vampirella is coming." The later issues show Vampirella having landed on Earth, trying to survive in human society, trying to earn money to live, as well as find more sources of blood, often feeding off humans she seduced. She finally manages to land a job as a model, but on the flight to her first job, the plane that carried her was struck by lightning, and the plane crashed. Desperate to survive, the vampiric tendencies of Vampirella emerged as she fed off the other survivors of the crash, eventually being found wandering away from the crash site by Dr. Tyler Westron, who runs a remote retreat for rich people to come to treat their mental issue. Westron reveals that he had to amputate her wings as part of the procedure to treat her, and that he knows of her extraterrestrial origins. The story gives greater emphasis on Vampirella as a character, along with her supporting characters. While Vampirella is recovering at Westron's retreat, we see that one of the other survivors of the the plane crash was Kurt Van Helsing, whose reanimated corpse turned by Vampirella's feeding is laid to rest by his brother, vampire hunter Conrad Van Helsing, and his son Adam. Together they aim to track down the vampire that turned their relative and kill it. By this point in the series, the comic evolves past the horror anthology format to fully revolve around the character of Vampirella. Vampirella discovers that Dr. Tyler Westron is, in reality, Nathan Shroud, a cultist warlock in the service of the deity known as Chaos. He leads the Companions of Chaos, a cult dedicated to the deity, and wishes to use Vampirella in his rituals to bring chaos to Earth. Vampirella fights off the cultists, ultimately destroying the Crimson Chronicles, an arcane tome used by the cultists to use magic. Vampirella ultimately destroys the cultists and the clinic with them, bringing her to the attention of Chaos itself, who often sends monsters after her to take revenge. Thus, Vampirella as a character began to take a position as a savior of humans from supernatural forces. Conrad and Adam Van Helsing continued their hunt, ultimately resulting in Adam and Vampirella finding and falling for each other. Though Conrad was initially against his son being involved with a vampire, one of the monsters they were supposed to kill, he too set aside his desire for vengeance to join Vampirella as an ally in her fight against the forces of chaos. The first story introduces plenty of elements that would go on to define Vampirella as a character and a series. We are introduced to Vampirella, who is portrayed as a free spirit, someone who doesn't hesitate to kill two innocent astronauts and feed off of them. Yet she is never portrayed as fully villainous or monstrous. Her sex appeal is also highlighted, being portrayed in a small blood-red bikini, even as she stalks and kills people. She was a femme fatale, someone who effortlessly attracted and manipulated men for their own ends. However, this characterization evolved as she became more heroic over the course of the story. The story also began with a science fiction spin on the vampire myth, with Vampirella as a humanoid alien from a distant planet, who happened to have characteristics that made her appear vampiric. The story is also comparatively lighthearted, with a lot of the initial stories dealing with Vampirella's struggles to fit in modern Earth society and try to feed her bloodthirst without being caught. As Vampirella's role in the stories increased, there was an increased focus on making Vampirella a more moral protagonist, with Vampirella often fighting against other supernatural creatures. Aside from these supernatural elements, Vampirella was often involved in other more lighthearted storylines, such as becoming a magician's assistant to a fifth-rate magician called Pendragon and helping him with his tricks, as well as brief stints as a movie actress and time travel plots that featured Vampirella fighting Dracula himself. The original run of Vampirella can be summed up as a fun horror adventure story with a hot femme fatale as the lead, fighting hordes of mythical and folkloric creatures. How did the Lilith retcon change Vampirella's origin? Shortly after Warren Publishing was shut down due to bankruptcy, Vampirella was bought by Harris Publications in the 80s, with Vampirella continuing publication under the imprint Harris Comics. Instead of trying to reboot the story completely, however, the writers decided to write the new series as a continuation of the original series, while also explaining the gap between the stories. In the miniseries Morning in America, we see that Vampirella and Conrad Van Helsing have been missing for over 10 years, with a group of supernatural creatures known as the Unseelie Congress being shown as the responsible party. Led by Nathan Shroud, they are shown as orchestrating attacks against the American population, with Adam Van Helsing fighting against them using his post as an American senator. While this is happening, Nathan Shroud also sneaks into an orphanage run by an old woman named Miss Normandy and converts a young girl named Chelsea into a vampire and gives her Vampirella's original costume. When Nathan's minions attack the orphanage to kidnap Chelsea, Miss Normandy attacks them and reveals her true identity as Vampirella, as she drains them of their blood to regain her youthful appearance. Vampirella, now back in her prime, is joined by Adam and her old magician partner Pendragon in her fight against Nathan Shroud and the Unseelie Congress. As they fight, Shroud uses his psychic powers to attack Vampirella's understanding of her past itself, poking numerous inconsistencies in her memory that suggest something is wrong with how Vampirella remembers her past. By the end of the miniseries, Nathan Shroud's ultimate endgame is revealed, as he planned to accumulate enough power to challenge and kill Nerberus, an ancient demon of chaos. However, his plan is discovered by the Unseelie Congress and foiled, with Nerberus ending up killing him instead, and he tries to return to Earth using Nathan Shroud's body as a conduit to travel between dimensions. As he draws everyone in Vampirella's party into illusions, granting them their every desire, Vampirella instead sees a vision of a beautiful woman with a dark presence behind her. Though Adam eventually helps her escape the vision vision and defeat Nerberus, Vampirella continues to obsess over the vision. As it would turn out, this woman was Lilith, a character who would change the character of Vampirella as we knew her. Slowly, as the series would go on, we come to discover that what we assumed were Vampirella's origins was a lie. Her life on Drakulon, her killing the astronauts, and coming to Earth via spaceship were all false memories implanted in her mind. Instead, her true origins are as a daughter of Lilith, who was the first wife of Adam, the biblical figure. Lilith is based on the actual biblical figure of Lilith, who was also the first wife of Adam, and was cursed by God to transform into a horrific demonic figure who ate people, here reframed as becoming a vampire. After being cast out of the Garden of Eden by God himself, Lilith is said to have fathered plenty of monsters, who we now know as the vampires. Vampirella was born to Lilith as a form of redemption for her, as a champion of God fighting against the threat posed by the monsters Lilith gave birth to. She was even gifted her iconic costume by spider seamstresses from the Garden of Eden, named Satyr and Circe, the names of the twin sons of the planet Drakulon. However, Vampirella's efforts to deal with Lilith's monstrous children were foiled by Madoc and Magdalene, two other spawns of Lilith whom Lilith hoped would redeem her. However, Madoc and Magdalene turned to evil instead, using their powers to spread violence and chaos. In a flashback, they are revealed to have brainwashed Vampirella when she first landed on Earth from Eden, and implanted false memories in her mind so that they can continue with their plans. They left Vampirella alive so that they wouldn't draw the attention of their mother, who could easily deal with them herself if she knew what they were up to. Instead, Vampirella was manipulated and set loose against the Cult of Chaos as a distraction, setting up the beginning of the Warren-era comics. After Vampirella defeats Madoc and Magdalene and stops their conquest of the Garden of Eden, Vampirella is charged with continuing their original mission and hunting down the rest of Lilith's monstrous children. Vampirella's crusade against vampires and other supernatural threats against humanity is reframed as an attempt to redeem her mother in the eyes of God. The switch from Warren Publishing to Harris Comics resulted in Vampirella using more complex storylines, with a darker, more violent tone. The change in backstories fits this decision, revealing that the lighthearted, absurd idea of Vampirella being a humanoid vampire from a planet of vampires is nothing but false memories implanted by other demons. That origin story was incongruous with the darker, more biblical-inspired stories that Vampirella would become the center of. The comics take inspiration from horror and superhero comics of the era, which were noted for their violent content and complex storytelling. While the original Warren comics portrayed Vampirella in the beginning as more of a damsel in distress, often caught up in dangerous situations with no way to protect herself, the Harris-era comics featured her as a far more capable warrior on her own right. How did World's End turn her origin into a long con? Though Lilith seemed a trustworthy figure at first, later adventures of Vampirella would lead her to Hell, where her mother, Lilith, is imprisoned. There, she finds Drakulon, which is revealed to be a realm within Hell itself, and what the planet Drakulon from her memories was based on. It is revealed that Drakulon is struggling with its decayed and dilapidated state directly connected to Lilith's power. Though Vampirella would attempt to restore Drakulon to some degree of prosperity, Lilith opposes this, even trying to kill Vampirella to stop her attempts. Despite this, with the help of Adam Van Helsing, who also finds himself stuck in Drakulon, Vampirella is able to restore the river Styx, which runs through Drakulon as a river of blood. Much like the rivers on the planet Drakulon, Styx acts as nourishment for the denizens of Drakulon, and by this act of Vampirella's, Lilith is ultimately weakened and destroyed by God himself. Adam Van Helsing, now a denizen of Drakulon, is elected as the leader of the newly thriving realm of Drakulon. However, this isn't the last time we will see Lilith, as the upcoming stories will confirm. Though the previous arc ended with Lilith's death, Vampirella finds herself back in Hell in the World's End story arc, this time in search of a mysterious artifact called the Heart of Darkness. Drakulon once again began to decay, with Vampirella given the mission to find the Heart of Darkness and free it, as it would result in prosperity and peace returning to Drakulon. She is led to an ancient mass sacrifice site, where the Heart of Darkness is said to rest, by Lorelei, a former enemy who seemingly teams up with Vampirella to save Drakulon. But it turned out to be a ruse to trap Vampirella, both as revenge on Vampirella by Lorelei, and a way for her to bring back her lover Moloch, who died in that location ages past. Vampirella is attacked by an entity known as the Void Swarm, a mass swarm of souls of the people who were sacrificed there, including Moloch. However, Moloch betrays and tries to assimilate manipulate Lorelei into the Void Swarm as well. While repelling the attacks, Vampirella finds the heart, with a spear emerging from it. Fearing what will happen if Vampirella pulls out the spear, the angel Metatron tries to intervene, attacking both the Void Swarm and Vampirella. However, in a split second where Metatron's concentration wavered, Vampirella managed to pry the spear out of the Heart of Darkness, to the dismay of Metatron. Through Metatron, the truth behind the Heart of Darkness is revealed. The Heart of Darkness in reality is the heart of an angel known as Malkuth. Malkuth was an angel on the side of God, blessed with free will. However, Malkuth used this free will to fall from grace and join the side of evil. As punishment, Malkuth was slain by Metatron, who used a lance to pierce Malkuth's heart and keep him contained. The lance was kept in place to contain the heart, for removing it would result in the destruction of the known world. It is ultimately revealed that Lilith did not, in reality, repent for her sins after God cast her out from the Garden of Eden, but instead plotted revenge on him and all of his creation. Rather than her redemption, it is revealed that Lilith birthed Vampirella as part of this revenge. The series reveals that it was not Madoc and Magdalene who altered Vampirella's memories to implant false memories of the planet Drakulon and her existence there, but Lilith herself. She did this to make Vampirella ignorant of the true goals of Lilith and her demon army. Madoc and Magdalene, who were killed by Vampirella earlier, posed no threat that wasn't the result of Lilith's manipulations. Lilith raised Vampirella as a moral person because she knew only a person of good heart could find and pull the spear out from the Heart of Darkness. This action unleashed the evil being contained in the heart in one quick blow, resulting in the destruction of nearly all existence. However, Vampirella, holding on to the spear, used the combined power of the spear and her own innate strength to destroy Metatron's heart, who had become bloodthirsty in his attempts to prevent Vampirella from releasing the heart. He even killed a former friend and ally in his attempts to kill Vampirella herself. The destruction of Metatron's heart resulted in a new beginning for all existence, recreating everything that was lost as a result of the Heart of Darkness being unleashed. We see Vampirella and Lorelei in the aftermath of the recreation of the universe, bathing in a pool of blood in a version of Drakulon that looks identical to the green landscapes of the planet Drakulon. Though this new version of Drakulon is a paradise within hell, Vampirella is informed by heaven that the evil contained within the heart is now unchained, traveling the universe to spread its vile influence. Vampirella swears to rectify her mistake, hunt down the evil that escaped, and protect existence from its actions. A side effect of this arc is the further development of Vampirella's character and personality. The Harris-era comics began with a new origin story for Vampirella, which left behind the absurd alien origins for a darker origin steeped in supernatural and biblical elements. This idea is further pushed forward with the reveal of Vampirella's true origins as a daughter of Lilith. Vampirella's quest against the supernatural forces is reframed as a matter of destiny. Her position as a guardian of humanity was set in stone from the moment of her birth. The World's End story arc introduces yet another complication to the idea of Vampirella the Savior. It suggests that the destiny that Vampirella had was fabricated from the start. This one revelation changed how Vampirella related to her heritage and her profession of defeating monsters. Without the destiny of redemption that she believed all this time, Vampirella is nothing but a highly trained killing machine sent to take revenge on God for her demonic mother Lilith, a fact that deeply troubles Vampirella as the series continues. How did the magic mirror explain all the conflicting backstories? By the time Vampirella Revelations came out, Vampirella had a bunch of conflicting origin stories, which made it difficult for the average reader to get caught up with the series. Thus, Vampirella Revelations tried to make sense of Vampirella's backstory in a way that was engaging to the audience, while also trying to explain the numerous changes and retcons that have been made to Vampirella's backstory. The story begins with Vampirella wiping out vampires in a bar. However, one of them, an older vampire, cryptically teases Vampirella about her origins, stating that there's more to it than she's aware of. Though she kills him, his words cause Vampirella to feel a familiar sense of confusion. Meeting up with an old friend, Hare Krishna, she confides that her memories of her origins are unreliable and outright ridiculous. He guides her to a blind psychic named Glass, who allows her to view the past, which shocks her and the audience. We see Lilith in hell conspiring alongside her demonic lover Belial to wipe out Lilith's children as their continued existence drained Lilith of her own power. Thus, using a mixture of her blood along with the soil of Drakulon, Vampirella was born. Vampirella is shown to be indoctrinated into her mission at a very young age, being convinced by her mother to slay her demonic brothers and sisters, hiding the fact that these actions were to bolster Lilith's powers for selfish reasons. However, as they also wanted to raise Vampirella as a moral and righteous person as well, to take revenge on God by releasing the spear from the heart of darkness as seen in World's End, they create a way to manipulate her, the magic mirror known as Eidolon. As Vampirella sees her past, her body, guarded by Glass, is attacked and taken by demons in the service of Belial. They kill Glass in the struggle and find that, as a result of Glass's psychic sessions, Vampirella has regressed into the form of a child, as she is caught in the past. It is revealed that Belial plans to resurrect his dead lover Lilith after her death at the hands of God, and is planning to do so using Vampirella, whose blood is formed from the undiluted blood of Lilith. However, being trapped within her own mind as a result of Glass's sessions, Vampirella is unable to form a link with either Eidolon or her home realm of Drakulon. In order to break Vampirella out of her trance, Belial decides to bring her back to Drakulon, where her connection to both Eidolon and Drakulon can be restored, and she can be used to revive Lilith. Demons begin to torture Vampirella's defenseless form, but after a visit from Glass, who releases his psychic hold on Vampirella, Vampirella returns to her original form. Enraged by the revelations she saw within the past, Vampirella embraces the violence of her original role as a killing machine for Lilith and slaughters every demon that crosses her path as she flies away, chased by Belial. After fighting off more demons sent after her by Belial, Vampirella decides to take matters into her own hands and flies directly to Drakulon to destroy Eidolon. While Vampirella fights off the swarms of demons Belial summoned, Belial uses the blood split by Vampirella to resurrect Lilith. With Vampirella killing the last of Belial's demonic horde, Lilith is at last at her full power, and Vampirella is quickly defeated by the combined forces of her and Belial. Lilith, finally able to confront her daughter at her full power, reveals that Vampirella was always just a pawn to her, one who had now fulfilled her purpose. Being the mother of all vampires, she grabs and drains Vampirella of her blood, but Vampirella's connection to Drakulon, the other part of her creation, gives her a power boost that allows her to kill the ancient archdemon. Saddened by the death of his lover, Belial surrenders and willingly walks into the sunlight to destroy himself. Thus, Vampirella is once again left alone, with her sense of identity revealed to be a lie orchestrated by her mother to manipulate her for her mother's gain. As she returns to Earth, Vampirella is left to deal with the fallout of these revelations, as she tries to find a purpose in life independent of the manipulations done by her mother and other greater powers. Eidolon is described as a magical mirror that is able to manipulate Vampirella's memories as the users, Lilith and Belial, see fit. This allowed them to change Vampirella's origin story, what she believed to be her past, so that she would continue her quest to kill the other children of Lilith, causing Lilith to grow stronger and stronger. It shifted from the absurd science fiction alien planet origins of the Warren-era comics to the daughter of Lilith seeking redemption origin story of the Harris-era comics, as Vampirella grew older and began to see the flaws in the first origin story as she grew older. This reflects how the origin story of Vampirella changed as the writers adopted a darker, more serious storytelling style for the series, using Eidolon as an instrument to reshape the backstory without contradicting the stories that came before. On a meta level, the story itself tries to justify the lack of consistency across the Vampirella series canon. It is trying to reconcile both the lighthearted anthology version of Vampirella with her current iteration as an edgy, supernatural hero fighting against demons. Rather than just retconning the events of previous stories, as comic book companies like Marvel and DC do, Vampirella chooses to effectively take every event that had occurred within the story and give a unique explanation that allows all the ridiculous, contrasting elements of the series to coexist. This unique approach of trying to fit all of Vampirella's contrasting backstories into one easy-to-understand timeline can be seen in the next major revamp of the title, written by Christopher Priest. When did the comics go full meta about her origin? After Harris Publications, the intellectual property Vampirella was acquired by Dynamite Comics in 2010. After a series of relaunches trying to reinvent the character, the series was announced to be written by Christopher Priest, most famous for his classic run on Black Panther for Marvel Comics in the 90s. By this point, Vampirella had already made a bunch of developments as a character, most notably working together with the Vatican to protect the people of Earth from supernatural threats. Priest Lilith took cues from the previous Vampirella titles that chose to work the various conflicting backstories into one coherent timeline, as well as included his own penchant for non-linear storytelling to produce a meta-comedic version of Vampirella that nevertheless still manages to make the emotional beats impactful. Nowhere is this more evident than in how Priest deals with Vampirella's existence and her own feelings towards her life. In the third issue, tired of the craziness of her life, Vampirella decides to meet a therapist who is a thinly veiled self-insert of the author Christopher Priest. Through Vampirella's conversations with the therapist, we are given an insight into how Vampirella sees and experiences the world, as well as the general tone and humor of the comic, as they go through the various origins of Vampirella throughout the ages. Vampirella and her mother, Lilith, who is a more sympathetic character in this run, appear and debate the confusing circumstances of their origins, thoroughly confusing the therapist. She mentions the Book of Prophecies, an ancient text said to explain their origins, with the only problem being that the book itself cannot properly decide on which version of their origins is the correct canon one. Lilith is described in the book as one of the first humans made by God, directly based on the biblical Lilith, and also as a queen of Drakulon. They also address and lampshade the confusing aspects of Vampirella being an extraterrestrial who merely has vampiric qualities with the other, more classical vampires she goes up against. Priest further complicates this by proposing an alternate theory through the character of the therapist, that Vampirella and Lilith are both undergoing a form of shared psychosis that causes them to believe that they are vampires. In this timeline, Vampirella has been on Earth for 50 years. Coincidentally, the revamped series began publication in 2019, on the 50th anniversary of the release of the first issue of the original Vampirella magazine. Drakulon is revealed to be an alternate dimension version of the Earth's moon, with the alternate Earth equivalent named Arcadia. Constant war between the citizens of Arcadia and Drakulon, as well as infighting between the various clans of Drakulon, led to Lilith, a powerful vampire warrior, taking up the mantle of ruler of all vampirists and leading the charge for their independence. However, she is thwarted in her attempts by the stronger clans until she joins forces with Belial, a powerful demon, in exchange for Belial lending her both his armies and teaching her the ways of magic as an apprentice. Lilith is made to birth demonic creatures to add to Belial's growing armies. During one such birth, the birth of a blonde humanoid baby caught Belial's eye, and he accused Lilith of defying him and conceiving a baby by someone other than him. Though Lilith denied the accusation, it was in vain, as Belial took the child with him as he traveled to dimensions far away to punish Lilith's transgression. The loss of her child caused Lilith to bargain with dark forces, creating more demonic spawn in the world as she tries to search for her child. As she grew more and more powerful as a sorceress, she became more feared and tyrannical in her reign over Drakulon. One day, while trying to create a child through magic to take her lost child's place, Belial suddenly returns and stabs Lilith, coating the statue with her blood. Belial boasts of his power and her insignificance, taunting her with the daughter he took away from her. However, all of the events prove to be an illusion set to trap Belial, with Lilith using the confusion to kill him. However, his death caused the child, Drakulina, to be sent through a portal, stranded within space and time, leaving Lilith alone once again. However, she discovers that the blood split on the earthen statue she was using in the trap had mixed with Belial's sorcery to create an actual child, whom she named Vampirella. Vampirella was thus raised as a way for Lilith to atone for her actions, both in creating the demonic hordes of Belial, as well as her cruelties as Queen of the Vampiri. However, when Vampirella reached young adulthood, a mysterious visitor arrived in their realm. A scientist working on a particle accelerator found himself stranded on Drakulon after a botched experiment. Trying to save him, Vampirella took him back aboard his dimension-hopping ship and traveled back to his home realm, Earth, only to discover there's no way back. It is in this manner that Vampirella became the character we all know and love today. We can see that Priest's versions of events don't contradict anything that came before, but instead reframe it so that it all feasibly happened. Drakulon, while still an alien location, is not a faraway planet or a realm within hell, but an alternate dimension version of the Earth's moon. Vampirella is simultaneously an extraterrestrial creature, as in the Warren-era comics, while also linked with demons and shares the role of daughter of Lilith and savior of humanity as the Harris-era version of the character. Lilith's part of the story mixes the magic and sorcery associated with her character with origins in the alien dimension of Drakulon, instead of being the biblical Lilith herself cast out of the Garden of Eden by God. This inconsistency is addressed as being part of the Book of Prophecies, a semi-reliable text that detailed the histories of the major figures in the Vampirella universe. Priest instead takes those elements and uses them to tell a more character-focused story based on the Vampirella canon. Vampirella, more than before, is defined by her closeness to humanity, and yet she feels estranged from it due to her origins. Priest conveys this by having her visit a therapist, which also allows him to poke fun at the concept of a sexy vampire lady from space coming to Earth to protect it from demons. How does the 1996 movie reinterpret Vampirella's origin? However, not every reinvention of Vampirella has succeeded as well as they have in the comics. There were plans to make a Vampirella film in 1976, with big-name stars like Barbara Leigh, Peter Cushing, Donald Pleasance, and Orson Welles all in consideration for roles. However, the sexually suggestive nature of the script turned off many actors, resulting in the project being halted. After that, the rights to the film adaptation was taken to Roger Corman, who was infamous for his low-budget B-movie production. He hired Jim Wynorski to direct the film and produced it himself. The 1996 film adaptation of Vampirella is a special case, as it came out during the time the Harris Publications version of Vampirella was coming out. However, as the Harris-era writers were still fleshing out the lore and characterization of their new version of Vampirella, the filmmakers had to go with her older Warren Publishing-era origin story. This resulted in the film feeling like it was caught between two eras, and thus being unable to properly utilize the strengths of either run. The film begins not with Vampirella, but Vlad Tepes, an original villain created for the movie. Played to B-movie perfection by Roger Daltrey, Vlad was one of the vampires living on the planet of Drakulon, where vampires had evolved past their need to feed on blood by drinking synthetic blood found on the rivers across the planet. However, Vlad and his followers all prefer the traditional method of preying on living creatures and draining their blood. As part of his plans, Tepes and his followers murder the Council of Elders, who govern the planet in cold blood and flee to Earth. One of the council members happened to be the father of our protagonist, young Ella, who follows Vlad to Earth to seek revenge. Ella is forced to rest at Mars, where she is found by astronauts and brought back to Earth. There she encounters a young nerd named Forey Ackerman, after one of the creators of Vampirella, who helps Ella get situated on Earth, and also helps her track down and confront one of Vlad's followers. Seeing her in action, he gives her the title Vampirella. It is revealed that nearly 3,000 years had passed since Tepes first landed here, with the large gap between his and Vampirella's arrival being due to her stranding on Mars. Vampirella discovers that Vlad now works in Las Vegas as a singer named Jamie Blood, who works with his cultists to create more vampires in his image. As his evil plans begin to come to fruition, Vampirella joins forces with Adam Van Helsing and his special government task force created to hunt down and neutralize supernatural threats to finally defeat Vlad Tepes once and for all and avenge her father. We can see the broad strokes of the original Warren-era comics origin story in the film story, though the inclusion of a vampiric villain from Drakulon, who travels to Earth first, is an original idea developed for the film. The film stays pretty faithful to the alien origins of the character, even depicting the rivers of blood and other fantastical elements of planet Drakulon. However, once Vampirella reaches Earth, the story becomes much darker, focusing on Vampirella's efforts to take down Vlad Tepes' organization without giving in to her baser instincts to drain the blood of living creatures. Though she tries her best, near the climax, a severely weakened Vampirella is forced to drain the blood of Adam Van Helsing, who gives his blood willingly, to finally gain the strength to defeat Tepes once and for all. This difference in tone can be seen in how the two stories deal with Vampirella leaving her home planet of Drakulon. In the comics, she leaves of her own volition to find a new place to survive. However, in the film, she leaves Drakulon to chase after her father's murderer and take revenge on him. The film filters the original lighter origin story through a darker, pulp horror-inspired narrative, which makes the film a unique member of the Vampirella canon, if not a particularly beloved one. Vampirella shows the sheer flexibility found in comic book narratives, evolving past her initial role as horror anthology host and becoming a superhero-esque figure of justice with her own lore and story. She was an alien, the daughter of a demon, and then somehow both at the same time. Vampirella provides a look at what female-led comic books can be. Despite originating with a character design made to appeal to the predominantly male audience, writers have given Vampirella autonomy and importance in the narrative that makes her a feminist icon. While she definitely deserves a larger spotlight. Vampirella is at her best in the unique niche she's carved for herself in comic book history.